This is 1-2 notes on variables. In this content, you'll be able to store info in a variable. You'll be able to overwrite a variable. You'll be able to store floats and integers in a variable. You'll be able to use Boolean variables to determine if you have true or false statements. You'll be able to write names or variables. You'll be able to identify keywords. You'll be able to input from the user, and you'll be able to add strings together or concatenate strings. Alright, so the first thing that we want to do is talk about variables. With your variables, what we're going to do, we're going to go File, New. I'm going to right click it, Python file, and I'm going to name that file store underscore info underscore in variable .py. Long but very descriptive. Alright. Now variables are a representation of a number, like a word. Price is the name of the variable. So let's actually type the word price. Price is identified as a variable. I say price equals, and then I'm going to say $10. So price equals 10 bucks. Now if we want to print this onto the Python console down here, what we have to do, we have to run. We're going to make sure we run info in a variable, run the right file. We can see that it doesn't run. But the $10 is stored in that variable. But if we want to see it actually pop up into the output window or the Python console, we have to type in the word print. And we got to type in the variable. So we want to print the variable price. And when we do that, I'm going to save. The output of 10 appears on your screen in your output console. That's how we store numbers into a variable. Now we could do a couple others. We could say Hershey bar is worth $2, and I want to print the Hershey bar. Let me see, it's the $2. Now, in addition to storing integers in a variable, we could also store a string into the variable by doing the same thing. So instead of saying Hershey bar is $2, we could say Hershey bar is equal to candy shop. Don't forget the quotes. We run it, and then the candy shop string appears here on the bottom. So that applies also. I want you to try a couple on your own there, and you try 1, 2, and 3 in your notes. Alright, next we're going to overwrite a variable. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a new file, because I like doing lots of new files. So it's nice and easy to find all my data. I'm going to type in the word late, var use.py. That's going to be used the later variable is used. I'm going to say in better detail right now. So now let's say you want to use the same variable twice, whether it be in a row or not. The variable you said the second time will be the actual variable used in the output screen or the Python console, because the computer works top to bottom, just like a textbook. You read top to bottom. The latest variable is what's used. So let's say if we got this price is $10 again, then we want to change that price to $20. We're going to see in the output window or the Python console, to be technical, the number 20 appears. That's because the second price is 20. So it always refers to, I overrided that 10 with the 20, because I use the same variable there. And that concept could be very beneficial to when you're working with big, large programs, like later on in the game. game project that we're going to be doing in the course, you're going to have it. You could override certain variables, override different aliens and alien colors. So it could be very useful. Why don't you try the U try 4 and U try 5 in your notes. Alright, next up we're going to talk about floats. Now floats, not every single number that you have in this world is a integer, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 0, or negative 4, 5, 6. You could also have decimals, and negative numbers too, and radicals, so on and so forth that you learned in math class. But I just want to point out here that you could also incorporate decimals and store decimals into a variable. And when you print it out, you'll see that 6.23 does pop out on the printout console. Laser variable used, I probably should adjust that back. And we'll make a new file for that. We'll call that floats.py. So file, new, floats.py. And we'll do the same thing. So we do price as the variable, 7.45 is our decimal, and we want to print out a decimal number. That's totally fine. The program could handle that. So do run, floats, and you can see the 7.45 is what appears. So decimals do work. Why don't you try the U try 6 and U try, not just U try number 6. Now we could we'll take a little deeper dive into this with decimals and floats. Sometimes you're going to have user input, meaning that somebody that's using your program is going to type information into your program, and your program is going to have to work with that information. Inside the machine, let's say the user types in 7.45, and for your program to work, we want to only use an integer. What we could do, we could take that number and do int, and int will convert it into an integer. So we run it, 7.45, that's really 7 as an integer. So we could take that user's input and convert it into an integer. Now let's say I have 7.95, it's still 7. So what it actually does, it just takes that user input, whatever's to the right of the decimal, it just deletes it. It converts it into an integer, and that's what's, the integer is what's stored in the price. Now, let's say the user types in something as a float, and you want it to be stored as a float, aka if you want it to be a decimal or saved as a decimal, we could type the word float instead of int, and then the 7.95 still exists, and that 7.95 is stored in that price. So those are little shortcuts on how you can convert the user's input into an integer or convert it into a decimal. Let's say the user puts in maybe 7.00, or just types in the number 7. Let's see what happens there. Types in the 7, we want to convert it to a float. It says now 7.0. However, if I did it as an integer, an int, it would say just 7. There won't be 0.0. So that'll be a little bit of a difference. Small little details. So if it's a float, it's 7.0. Now there's use try 7 and 8, so why don't you work on those and see if you can do this task. Alright, the next thing we're going to be talking about are Boolean or Boolean values. That's really just true-false statements. So what we're going to do, we'll go File, right-click New Python file. Let's call this Boolean underscore master.py. In this program, I'm going to have two variables. I'm going to say a equals 5 Oops. And the variable b, which will also equal 5. And with the Boolean, I'm just checking and have a comparison of the a and the b. Boolean, it just determines, is the question I'm asking a true statement or is it a false statement? For now, that's all you really need to know. So let's just say another variable result equals, I want to ask the question, is a equal to b? Now, unfortunately, we can't just use one equal sign like we're used to in math class. The actual equal sign in computer science is the double equals. So I'm asking, is a equal to b? And we're going to print that result, whether it be true or false, into the Python console. So I'm going to print the result. Oop. Ran the wrong program. Run. Boolean number. And it's true. A does equal 5 does equal 5. So we're comparing the two values stored in that variable. So variable a is equal to variable b. Now let's say I change this to 7. The variable a is storing the number 7 and the variable b is storing number 5. I run it. It's false. These two numbers are not the same. That's just a Boolean. I just wanted to show you true and false. So those are Boolean values. True statements or false statements. Let's do you try number 9 and you try number 10 in your notes. Alright, the next thing to talk about is how we write our names for our programs or our .py files. You probably noticed that sometimes I use an underscore, like you've seen here in this store info in a variable.py. And then I did late variable use.py, but I didn't use underscores. Boolean master, I did. Now, based on your own judgment, it's probably best to use underscores that help separate words so you could see and people can understand exactly what the program is supposed to be. Now, in addition to doing the PY files, it's also best to do it with your variables and how you write variables out. So let's do file, let's do right click, we'll do a new Python file. Let's call this under then underscore then score .py. And say underscore equals 10, another variable name. Notice how I use the underscore to help separate things. Just say 16 stored in that. Winning score. So just make sure you use underscore. That'll separate words. It does make things a lot prettier and a lot easier to read. And that's just being nice to other coworkers and people that are also looking into your program. Well, that's just a whole example of variables. Now if we wanted to print all those out, we would just do print and then the variable name. Like underscore. And then 10 is what appears because that's what I'm asking to print out. Why don't you try number 11 and we'll move on to keywords. Now you probably already noticed some words are highlighted, like the word print, or we did integer, or we changed different colors on the screen. There's such a thing called keywords in computer science where you have different keywords that are used. So I'm going to do right, once again, new. Let's say key underscore words .py. And some example of keywords you already seen before. Print. You do integer. Float. Now if I notice that if it's not a keyword, it's not going to be highlighted. keywords are really just already pre-written code that the Python already uses. So the word print, you already know it prints to the console, and it converts the number that's given into an integer. Float converts the number into a flotation number, or aka decimal. And then input. This could be a next one that we're going to use with keywords as far as collecting input from the user. And that's what's coming up next. So they're just keywords. It's just pre-written code already programmed already into the computer, into the software that tells the computer what to do. Alright, next up, we're going to get input from the user. So let's do right click, we'll do our new Python file. Let's say user input. Oopsies. Spell that. User input.py. Alright, to do this, any type of user input that we collect has to be stored into a variable. So I'm going to say name, the variable name, because we're going to get the user's name. So input, open parentheses, then you got to use your quotations. What is your name? So that's a string that will appear, what is your name will appear on that Python console down below. And then the user is going to type in their name, and it's going to get stored into the variable name. Now once it's stored, I'm going to say print, and we're going to respond. I'm going to say hi, and then I'm going to give back the feedback. Now I'm going to do hi is what we typed in as a string, and then I'm going to add the variable that we're printed out. So let's say hi, what is your name? The user types in Johnny. Johnny is stored in the name variable. Then we're going to print out hi, and then Johnny is going to pop out. So let's watch that actually happen. What is your name? Jake. Hi, Jake. Will appear there in the bottom left. Cool. So that's how you collect input from the user, by using input. Alright, why don't you try try number 12, and then we're going to talk about string addition, or concatenating strings. Alright, next up we're going to do string addition here. So we're going to do file, right click, pardon me. I'm going to delete some of these. Let's see them popping up over here. New.py. Oh, we're just going to do it on this one. New.py. Or string addition, if you want to type in string addition underscore addition.py, that would be good. And we're going to type in print. This is a patient file program. Name. What is your name? Alright, and then we're going to store in color. I like lowercase. Input. What is your favorite color? What we're going to do, we're going to take those user input answers that are stored here in name and color, and we're going to print it out on one line. Instead of it being on two separate lines, we can print it out on one line going across. So we're going to do print